Once again, just wanted to welcome you to today's EnRoute webinar. My name is Stuart, and today we'll have a presentation by Aaron Clapp. He'll be going over how to use the point editing tools in EnRoute. So he'll show you all the tips and tricks that he's got with those, how to make your workflow a little bit faster, more efficient. And when he's done with that presentation, then we'll turn it over to you folks for a question and answer session. So if you do have any questions that you think of during the presentation, please go ahead and type them into the chat window at the bottom there, and then we'll answer as many of those as we can. And one more thing, we will be recording today's webinar as usual. So if you have to step out or you'd like to review this or send it to someone else later, we will be uploading it to our YouTube channel, and we will send everyone an email link as well so that you can review it anytime you like. And with that, we'll kick it over to Aaron.
All right, sounds good. Thank you. All right, so to get started here, we're gonna take a file that I intentionally made it very poor looking, and we're gonna just kind of go over some of the generic tools that we use for point editing. Some of this stuff may seem pretty basic, but I found that when you're getting graphics from other customers, whether it be something you scanned in or vectorized, sometimes there's a big struggle with trying to get stuff to look decent or how to quickly modify things and not have to keep sending it back to the user or get a better graphic. You can take a pretty messed up graphic and do some quick editing tools or editing to make it look pretty good. So just to kind of give you a preview of what we're looking at, this was the original file that this came from. I took it into another program and made it really blurry and then vectorized it, and I got this image over here on the left. So this is the one we're going to be editing. And then just as like a little quick snapshot preview of what we kind of ended up with, over here on the right is a quick sample of what 5 or 10 minutes worth of work was able to kind of produce. Now, in a perfect world, what I'd probably just do is change my vectorizing settings and go from there. But if you had a file, a DXF file, and you don't have a graphic like this to vectorize it from, you would have to start doing some of your modification yourself. And so this looks pretty decent compared to what we have over here on the left. And so we're just going to kind of go over some of those tools that I used to create this product over here on the right-hand side. So let's start out with the location of some of our tools. They're a little spread out, I will admit. One of our tools is over here on the left-hand side. If I click and hold, I can get access to these tools and drag them over. These are some of our real basic ones. So the point selection, make a straight line, make a sharp corner, or make a smooth tool. There's also this one here, which is add noise to contours. You might use that for something specific, but in this case, we'll let that one be. And then there are some other ones under the draw menu as well. And over here on the sidebar, these are all editable here, so you can get access to them here or on the sidebar underneath the draw. So I can select these, or I can use my trim, extend, fillet, or join. These are some of my basic ones here. So to start out with, let's just take a look at some general principles about point editing tools. One of the things that I really like about EnRoute is that if I select my shape here, and I just come over here and click Edit Points, and I select my object, you can see I have some snaps on, so I'll turn that off for now. But I'm going to click on my object, and now I can see all the points that are in this file. One of the useful things that I can also do, and this is just kind of at the beginning here, is I can right-click and I can say Show Details. If I show details, the next time I hover over a line segment, I get this little yellow pop-out box, which kind of tells me a little bit about that line segment. So the length, the angle, start X, start Y, whatnot. If I go to an arc, it's going to tell me, what the chord, the height, sweep angle. It's going to give me a lot of useful information. in case I need to figure anything out about that arc and reproduce it or something similar. Another kind of visual cue in EnRoute, as I'm going to zoom in here a little bit, is that EnRoute will visually tell you what's an arc, what's a curve, and what's a line. So if I highlight or hover my mouse over this line, I get this little arc symbol. And I'm going to actually turn off details just for a second so you can a little more easily see that. So you see that little arc thing that pops up there? So that tells me that this is an arc. Um, I can also go down here, and I'm going to zoom in, and if I do the same thing for a line, it tells me this is a line. If this has been converted to a curve, it's going to show me the little squiggly line. So there's a couple things to know, is that if it's an arc or if it's a curve, it's going to be treated a little bit differently. So one thing that's unique about arcs is that if I select an arc, it's just an arc. And this even looks like a flat line, but it actually is an arc. I can move these in and out and do things to it. I can move the points back and forth, but there's not much I can do with it. But if it's a curve, then I have these Bezier handles that I can edit. And this makes fine-tune editing a little bit better. So I can kind of move and change things using these handles, and those are available to me when a line is considered a curve. One thing that I can do is I can take this curve, let's say if I want to do the same thing to that line, I could just click on this line, go up to the nodes and right click on the node, and I can say convert to a curve. And when I do that, now this line becomes a curve, and now I can use the same little editing handles to make changes and whatnot to it. So something that's kind of unique is that if you want to make fine-tune adjustments like that, kind of like Bezier type style adjustments, you can take any line and convert it into a curve or an arc. One thing that is also really cool about EnRoute is that, and I kind of demonstrated this a little bit earlier, is I can just grab any line I want and just drag it, and it converts it into an arc for me. So I can just left click and pull on any one of these lines, and it will turn it into an arc. So that one went from a straight line to an arc. So that's kind of a unique thing about these tools that I really like, is they're real kind of simple and easy. So when we look at this file, we see there's a lot of different things going on. There's some sharp edges, there's some funky artifacts and different things going on here. So I'm just going to take a look at, for example, this leaf down here, and we're just going to kind of work on this just for a second using some of the tools. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and select my object, and then let's take a look at these. These corners here, if we look at our original graphic, these corners are not that sharp. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to come in here with my smooth approximation tool, and I'm going to create some smooth arcs here for us. So let's say I want to adjust this. So I'm going to left click once and then left click again. And I'm going to get these two pink circles. And then this allows me to adjust some things back and forth. You can see that all of a sudden now I have Bezier handles, so I can move these around if I want to, or I can drag these back and forth, and it's going to do some auto tuning for me. So maybe I don't necessarily want to do all the work, but you can see that the green line is my preview. So I can maybe pull this up or down, and let's say I like that. When I'm ready to accept any changes, all I have to do is hit that enter button, and I'm done. So that changes it. I can make these as big and as long as I want. So I could take a line from here to here. If I wanted to smooth that out, I can go with the recommended suggested options, or I can make some adjustments here. Maybe I want it to come out a little bit farther. I hit enter, and as simple as that, I've got a smooth arc that goes all the way from here to there. If we look over here, this obviously is not right. So I'm gonna click here, and maybe make some adjustments here. There's an extra point in there that's kind of messing me up a little bit, so I'm gonna back it off, and maybe here it gives me something close to what I want, but I keep getting interrupted there. So maybe what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna escape out of that. I'm gonna go back to my point editing tool, and I'm just gonna select that little square and hit the delete key on my keyboard. So you can get rid of that point. In fact, I might even get rid of this one too. Make things a little bit simpler. I'm gonna go back to my smooth approximation tool, and there we go. This is a little bit better. So now I can kind of make some slight adjustments, hit enter, and just like that, I've got a smooth edge that much more resembles our original graphic over here. So real simple. Most of these are going to be in that way. Let's just go over the insert corner. Let's just say let's use the same corner as an example. If I want to make this a sharp corner, I'm going to pick 2 points, and there it kind of automatically gives me what that corner is going to look like. And I can move these little sliders up and down. I think this one might be fixed. Yeah, this one's a fixed position, but I can move this one up and down. If I want to reposition any of my points, I can right click a couple times, but I'm still within the tool. So maybe I want to go here to here. If I don't like that, I can right click, and then I can move it back here and do this. So there's several different things that you could do. Let's say I like this a little bit better. Again, hit enter on your keyboard, that easy, and now you've got a sharp corner. And we can do that with any one of these. Make the adjustments, hit enter, and now I've got a sharp corner. Another thing that you might be interested in doing is creating a straight line. Here's a good one. Same principle is what it kind of uses. So I'm going to select a line, a point down here, and let's say I want it to end right there, and hit enter, and it'll simply straighten that line out for me, irregardless of how many points I put in here or how many. I can, again, drag this up and down to kind of modify where I want that line, and when I hit enter, I get an apply. So real easy and simple tools to use, and makes things really kind of easy to modify and adjust things. So I can easily start changing things. Let's kind of fix this. This seems a little broken to me. So this is more supposed to be a round figure. So let's just kind of take a look at this, maybe edit this a little bit, bring these lines in here, kind of make some small adjustments, hit enter, and just as easily as that, I've got an adjusted, a more perfect circle. And then I can do this again, and just kind of keep adjusting this. And sometimes you might not get the perfect adjustment the first time. Just hitting enter and just reapplying it multiple times can sometimes give you a better result. So sometimes it's not about just getting that perfect arc every single time. You might need to do it in sections, like on this one's kind of bad. So maybe I'll do this curve first and get a general shape to work with, and then maybe make some adjustments from here and say, okay, now that I've got the general rounded shape, maybe I'm going to adjust this a little bit more, pull it out, maybe change my angle, make these a little bit bigger, kind of whatever you want to do, and hit enter, and those are applied. So those are your basic, real quick, real simple editing tools that are real powerful in just trying to simplify your graphic and change up the shape of your drawing. Another useful one we're going to talk about next is not located in this toolbar, but it's located in the Weld Join toolbar, and that's the cut by line. This is one that's not frequently, again, this one's kind of in a weird position, so it's not within the rest of the point editing tools. But if we look at this graphic, we see that this main leaf over here is not connected to this little tiny piece over here. And over here it is. I can do one of two things. Um, I'm going to do this first, is I'm going to select both of these pieces just like this. And the cool thing about this tool is if I use the cut by line, I'm just going to draw a line and I just simply left click and then drag and then left click again. And what that actually does is because I had them selected, this actually draws and completes two shapes for me. So now these two items are two individual shapes. And if I click on my point editing tools, I can come in here and kind of drag some of these away like this. There we go. So now I've actually separated those two pieces and now they're separate. Just as easy as doing that. I can do this another way as well by not selecting the objects. If I don't select any of the objects together and I use the same tool, it doesn't connect them. Basically, what ends up happening here is it actually just creates two open contours. And so this may or may not be what you want it to do, but depending on your use case scenario, now we have two split lines like this. The reason why I would probably prefer not to do it this way is because now I have to go in here manually and draw some lines that connect to these corners like this and then merge everything together. That's a little extra work for me. I would prefer not to do that. So in this case, in my scenario, I think I can just do this, and this saves me a little bit of time. Let's move these around. Oop, that one needs to go this way. So now I've got two separate shapes pretty quickly, and I could very easily use my point editing tools to fix some of this stuff. So I'm just going to create like a straight line here just to get rid of a bunch of those nasty points. And then I can use my arc tool to create a smoother path. And just like that, within a few clicks, I've got everything separated, pulled together, and that looks much better. So there is that cut by line. So depending on what you're doing, you may or may not want to just cut the piece in half, or you may want to have it joined together. If you want it joined together, you just have to have them selected before you use the tool. So we'll go ahead and close that one. Well, actually, we'll leave it up here in case we need to use it. Let's see here. So the next set of ones are these guys over here, the extend and trim lines. These can be used effectively to extend or trim any object. So if I cut this line in half, and let's just grab that point there real quick so that we can demonstrate what we want to do. All right, so we have got a line that doesn't connect here. What this is going to do is if I go into my extend, and I've got several different options here. I'm going to do it by graphic, and I'm going to click on my line, and then all of a sudden it gives me a new line. This is really useful if I want to keep the trajectory of the line that I'm using. There's an obvious arc to this line, and so as I move this along, it's going to follow that same arc path. And so I can kind of move this up and down like that. I can also do it by length if I want, or by boundaries. And so in this case, obviously, I kind of move the lines around so they don't match up really, but you can kind of tell it's trying to snap my cursor to that. It kind of gets stuck right there. It's because I have my snaps on. So you could use this to snap up to a line real close if you needed to. So that's extend. Same thing happens when we do trim. I can take this line and we'll just do it by graphic here. and it gives me kind of a little preview of what that's going to look like, and I can just left click and then it removes that amount. If I decide to do it by length, I can put in 0.25 inches. That's what I want it to remove, and it removes 0.25 inches at a time. I'm going to draw another line here just for as an example. So here I've got some intersecting lines, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to do the trim, and if I do it by boundaries, you can already see that the blue highlighted areas are going to be trimmed off basically by boundaries. So anytime this line intersects another line, it creates the boundary. So I can select that and just knock off that line just like that. So now I have two lines, that could be easily trimmed that way. So that's kind of using these extend and trim tools. Let's go and connect these. Actually, let's do that. Let's connect them back up because for our next example, we're gonna need to have these connected. So I'm gonna snap these together like that, and then I'm gonna grab the entire graphic and merge it together. Perfect. Okay, so for our next example, I'm going to use the point editing tool called the add fillets or fillets or however you want to call that. It's a mystery to me, but that's okay. I think it's a French word, but I'm not sure. Anyway, fillets, fillets, whatever you want to call it. It allows us to select a corner, again, very similar to my point editing tools, and it's going to create a radius on that corner that I can specify here. So I can make this 0.125. I can make this whatever I want, and my preview will change. I can do that to one corner, or if I decide, I could just do it to all corners. So I could do it to all inside corners or just all corners in general and hit apply. This is going to take a second, but it's going to give me a preview of what all my corners are going to look like. And interesting, but I can choose to do that. This is actually really helpful for if you're using if you're doing a lot of work with if you're doing channel letters or if you're doing push through letters or anything like that. Um, you might want to round off any edges that you have, any sharp edges or anything like that, to make sure that all of your edges have a certain radius to them. So for example, if you need to make sure all the inside corners are rounded off to a certain bit size so that when you match up the push through letters, uh, this is a good option for doing that. Using this add fillets to contours or add rounded corners to contours is a good option for that. This last one is join contours. This is really good if you're joining two basically open contours together, and that's what this allows you to do. I can select the end of one segment and then highlight the other segment, and it'll automatically join a line to it and then merge it together as one piece. This is kind of helpful. It kind of actually saves you a step because if you were to draw this line manually, then you'd have to try and merge these together. And when they're merged together, it's just one little step here that this allows you to save yourself so you don't have to click on the merge. But it doesn't give you near as many options in terms of what you want that line to look like. It's just going to create a straight line. So if that's all you're looking for, then that'll work. But if you're looking for more of a different line, you might go a different route, but that's available there. I think that kind of covers most of the point editing tools in terms of what they do and how they function. Again, most of these lines, it was just a matter of simply uh, making some small changes, and we can just kind of quickly kind of go through some of these and just. Oh, actually, I forgot. One of the I wanted to mention too. It's not necessarily a point editing tool per se, but it's a helpful tool to have and know about is the reduce points um, or the clean up selected contours. So if I click on this, we can tell that there's a lot of points in here. Um, every once in a while, you will run into an issue with EnRoute where you might even have a tool pathing problem or maybe an output problem where some line or some object in the drawing is causing an error or some kind of problem with the tool path. Um, if I go in here and I select my object and I do a cleanup, this is one way that you can help your graphic, especially after a vectorization. Typically, vectorizations tend to cause a lot of problems with graphics. And so once you've kind of cleaned up the file a little bit, I typically always just like to come in here and do a cleanup real quick. And basically, it reduces the point count. And so it went from 536 to 474. It doesn't change the look of the graphic at all. In fact, visually on screen, there's no change. And as long as I keep my tolerance super, super low, it's not going to change the graphic. So by leaving it at 0.001, what this does is it says, okay, I'm going to remove all the points that are necessary, but if it changes the graphic more than 0.001 of an inch, it's not going to do it. And so this allows me to do this multiple times until I get to the point where it just doesn't do anything anymore. And now if I look at my points, yeah, there's still a lot of points, but there's way less than there was before. It'll help me reduce some of those possible errors that you might get with a file that has been overloaded with points. Um, this can really help, especially too when you're zooming in and zooming out. The more points that you have, the more choppy it's going to be. Um, so doing these in conjunction with these other tools are going to be really helpful. At the end of every file, I would typically always go back and do a reduce points just for safety because I like to remove all non-essential points that the computer has to process through. Just makes your files cleaner, more efficient, less accident prone or problematic. Just kind of makes things a little bit easier. So in your tool pathing, your machine isn't going to run into a weird issue because of the tool path that EnRoute has created is following some weird shape or something like that. So that kind of basically covers most of your tools. Again, real easy stuff, not anything super great. And we're just simple stuff, but you know what? This can save you a ton of headache. If you get in a file that just needs some small adjustments, this would be perfect. So at this point, I think we would probably just try and see if we could get some questions and see what else we got.
Okay. Yeah, if you folks have any questions either about point editing tools or anything else you've just been wondering about en route, please go ahead and type it into the chat window there. Aaron will do his best to address all those. Looks like we do have one already from Scott. He said that sometimes I overlay two objects and try to trim and it won't let me trim. Do you have any ideas
Yeah,
what caused that?
sometimes that can happen. You can get duplicate lines. Um, the tricky part about that is that they're really hard to see. In the new EnRoute 6, they have well, it might have been even in the later editions of 5, I don't remember, but we have this show intersecting contours, and in this file I don't have any, but if I were to draw some lines here, and then turn this on, it shows me exactly where the intersecting contours are at. So in this example, it doesn't really make a whole lot of sense, but let's say I take this, and I copy it, and then I paste it right on top of each other. Instantly, you really don't see the fact that I have two drawings on top of each other, but when I turn this on, I instantly get all kinds of red points. So what I would need to do is probably either delete one of the lines or get rid of it or something like that. In your case, what I would probably start doing is maybe grab some of those points and see if you can pull them around a little bit and see where it's overlapping. Um, you might even also, um, there might be some things you could do with your snap toolbars, sometimes turning them on or off, depending on which tool you're using. Sometimes can be beneficial or a detriment. I have had some issues where when trying to use certain tools, the snaps just get in your way. So having them turned, all of them turned on all the time isn't super helpful or can be not helpful. So that could be also a problem. Another thing too could be um, you could just take the graphic and explode it and then um, just remerge it. And sometimes that will fix some issues as well.
So he did give a little more detail. He said
Okay.
overlaying two objects, such as a letter into a circle to make it one piece. Sometimes it won't let me use the trim tool.
Okay. So let's just take, let's see. Sometimes you might even have to convert some objects to let's do the trim here. So trim. So in this case, it's always working. Well, of course, it's hard to get an example of something like that. But sometimes what I've had to do in the past, and I dealt with this with a customer a couple weeks ago, we actually had to select the entire graphic, and for whatever reason, we just had to explode everything. Explode the entire graphic, and then go into the trim, and then it would let him do it. So it was a weird thing where there was something with the drawing that he had. I don't know if there was some kind of lines or issues, but in that case, we had to just we had to explode the contours first and then get it to work. So that might be something you could try is explode the graphic, delete the lines that you need, or try and trim again. And then when you're done, just merge everything back together again.
Okay. He said it might be when I import two images and overlay, then try to trim.
Yeah, that's possible. And that might be where if you explode them and then rejoin them back together, then that might help. But yeah, that might also be. Also, the snaps. Try turning off snaps too, because sometimes snaps can cause some issues, especially when you're zoomed in really, really far. Um, like if we're zoomed way in on this, sometimes when you use those snap tools, it'll snap to something that's off screen. You can't see it right off the bat, and it's causing a problem with what you're trying to select. So those are two suggestions I would have. If you have some more specific problems with a file that are really giving you a hard time, give us a ring. We'd gladly love to take a look at it and see if we can figure out what's going on.
Excellent. Thank you, Aaron. And Larry asked, is there a quick way to detect stacked items?
Stacked items typically is this tool here. If the show intersecting contours, that's probably like the number one thing that I use to detect stacked items. Um, I want to think if it's a closed contour like this and it's exact copy on top of each other, you're going to see a lot of these little points, and you shouldn't see those points. Like here, these are not intersecting contours. You should never see something like this. The only time you should see one of these lines or one of these little crosshairs is if you have a line like this intersecting. That's where you should see those. So if you have a flat line or a straight line or a curve or something like this that doesn't look right, that means that you've got a double line. Another thing that you can do is, let's just say we didn't have that tool and you weren't for sure. One of the things that you can do is let's take Um, oh, let's draw a square around this. So let's say that we imported this graphic and it had this border and it had this in it. One of the things that you'll notice is that when I select this, it's blue. When I select this, it's blue. But when I select both items, and I'll demonstrate on this file over here, if I select both of them, the inside should turn red. In this case, because I have a duplicate line, when I select it, both items are blue. That's not right. So if you see that, that means that there's a duplicate line on top of something somewhere. So easiest way to find out in this case is just by grabbing an object and hitting delete and then saying, oh, that's not it. Hit undo and then click on some of the other objects in your file like this, hit delete. Oh, wait, I just deleted it and there's still something underneath there. So I might click on it again and delete. Okay. The important thing here is not to highlight, because if you highlight like this, it's going to select both of the bad objects. You want to just click select to hit that delete to find out if it's duplicate or not. So that's another quick tell. Now if I select both of them, now they're back to the way they should be. So that alternating colors between blue and red should be there, and if it's not, that's another tell. This is a little bit less common, but you can also go into the side view. Sometimes what will happen is you may have duplicate lines on top of each other, but they may be on different z-axis. So you might have a line that's maybe farther down in the z. So sometimes checking the side view might give you a little bit of an indication of what's going on. That's not as common of a one, but it's also another thing to kind of check. So those are the three things that I usually use. I use my highlight, I look at my side view, and then I turn on my show intersecting contours, and those usually tell me more often than not if we have an issue. Oh, and then the last one, there is another instance where this might happen. So if we have a line, just to say a line like this, I'm going to copy it and then paste it right on top of each other. And then I'm going to change the direction of one of them. This will happen very frequently. So anytime you have an open contour, you are only going to see one chevron. So you should only see, like in this line, no matter what direction I create this line in, I should only see one chevron. And in this line, I have one line, so I have one chevron, and that tells me what direction it's going in. Same here, it's going the opposite direction. But in this weird line, I actually have two. So if you ever see an open contour like this that has two chevrons pointing in opposite directions, you know 100% that there's something wrong with that line. And so if you click on one and delete it, now you're back to one. So that's another way of, especially if you're importing like a DXF file that's not merged together for you already, you might get a lot of those double chevrons for double contours and stuff like that. That would be the other thing to look for.
Okay, thank you so much, Aaron. Let's see here. Oh, Richard commented that he'd like to see a webinar on vectorizing. So maybe we can get that added into our
Yes,
webinar schedule, go over that more in detail.
in fact, you are in luck, sir, because next month is the vectorizing. So tune
Oh,
in next month.
excellent. I thought we had it on the schedule at some point.
Yep.
Perfect. So then it looks like we have one more question for today. Scott said, if I need to place two objects together, such as two squares, and that I want to turn into one rectangle, do you have any trick to make them line up exactly?
That's a good question. So that's where using your snap tools is really going to be key. And I love snap tools. They're the bee's knees, man. So I'm going to take these two squares. I know that sounds funny, but they're snap tools are the best. So um, I'm gonna not use rounded corners just because it'll make it a little bit easier. But all right. Actually, I want them to be exactly the same size. All right, so if I need to combine these two objects, The best way for me to do this is turn on some of my snaps, and then I'm going to use the move commands. So what I'm going to do is I want to move this corner right here and merge it with this corner right here, and I want it to be exact. So to do that, I'm going to use my snap tool, the snap to the endpoint, and I'm going to click on my move objects. Once I'm in my move objects, now I can start moving my cursor around and it's going to snap to position. So the first thing that I need to do is I'm going to just say move absolute. So I'm just going to move it based on an absolute coordinate. And I'm going to click on this corner to highlight it. So now I have my object highlighted that I want to move. I'm going to click it again to snag that corner. And now I'm not holding my mouse or anything down. I'm just moving my mouse around, and I can snap it to the next nearest thing. So I can snap it to that box right there. And now I can grab these two objects and weld them together. And that would be the easiest way. There's also
Awesome.
other things that I can do. I'll just show one other quick one. This uses a multiple of, this example is going to use two different snaps. So on this one, I want it to snap to a midpoint. So I'm going to use snap to a midpoint and snap to an endpoint. And I'm going to hit move. I'm going to highlight this square. I'm going to highlight this corner because I want this corner to be in the middle of this square. So now I've got this little snap right here. I can snap it right to the middle. And now I can highlight these and weld them together.
Cool.
And that's the easiest way to kind of get two squares like that. And again, you can use a ton of different ways to weld. A lot of these are, like this one is a snap to the center of an arc. This is just snap to a nearby contour. This one is snap to an intersection. So there's all kinds of different ones that you can use here. And based on the combination that you use will kind of help you move things around and snap things together into different pieces. And then you can just weld them together.
Perfect. Thank you, Aaron. Scott says you're always full of tricks. Yep, Aaron really likes the snaps. In fact, we will be covering that in our December webinar. We'll be talking more about how to take advantage of snaps in EnRoute. So I think
Yep.
that's all the time we have for today. Thank you, everyone, for attending, for all the questions, and for encouraging comments. Looks like people got a lot of good information out of this, Aaron. So thank you so much for putting that together. And as Aaron mentioned, our next webinar, we will be focusing on vectorizing in EnRoute, and that will be on November 12th. And so we'll be able to go over vectorizing a little bit more in depth. And I think that's everything for today, and we'll see you next month. Thank you.